Well, g'day and welcome to beautiful Seaforth Beach. I'm making this video because I watched one of the TED Talks last night by, I forget his name, just some guy who's a theoretical philosopher, professor of something, trying to explain his position on and the current position humanity has, intellectually I guess, on the purpose of humanity and our place in the universe. And he was prattling off a whole load of potential scenarios for human existence, etc., etc. And I listened to the whole talk, which went for about 10 minutes, and realised that this guy has absolutely no clue, that they're just clutching at whatever they think the best straw might be. And whilst I understand as a spiritual person, I guess, that not everything I say everybody is going to want to believe, and in fact 20 years ago, if I had been watching this video I'm about to make, I probably wouldn't believe it either. I would have thought, how much of that magical herb have you been smoking, Dave? But I guess my position these days is a little different, because having had I don't know, I can't really count them now, but 3 or 4 prolific major spiritual experiences in my life, 3 of those, or possibly 4 of those, involving leaving the physical plane entirely. My story is very, very different from what it might have been had those experiences not happened. And all of those experiences, just for argument's sake, since I mentioned smoking the herb before, all of those experiences were in a completely normal and straight state of mind. There was no substance or anything involved in them. But and I'm not going to go particularly into those experiences now in this video, because it's just a shorter one. But I will just briefly cap on the major experience, I guess the prime experience that I've had. In 1997, I left my physical body, if you want to call it that. I really don't know how to put this, but I awoke from this realm into another realm, into eternity, wherein I found myself face to face with God, or the creative source of the universe, if you have a more scientific leaning. I don't really care which one, and realise that I am part of that, and at the same time all of that all together. And I was downloaded with a bunch of information, mostly relative to my own association on the physical planes, things that will be useful to me, I guess. But from that day on, my life was very, very different, as you can imagine. And it took me many, many years to be able to talk about that experience, and many years more to be able to integrate it using the principles of the information that were given to me in that download, and later upon my return to the physical realm through various modalities of teaching, etc. Teaching and learning. And the main vehicle for learning that I've had since then has been the book A Course in Miracles, and many other books, but that's the main one. And so I thought in this video, just putting that aside for a second, I'll just put forth my perspective on what our true purpose is as human beings in a planet spiralling around in a universe seemingly without any kind of intention or direction whatsoever. And I'll just try to put it all together. I've done this before in a video that was quite well received, but since then I have had 1 or 2 other experiences which have taken some fathoming, I must tell you. It's trying to fit them into where I already found myself in a very changed state of mind, to again have to fit in a new experience. And you know, I've always been very disconcerting, I suppose, or discerning probably is a better word, with experiences and knowledge and information that comes to me, in that if it doesn't fit, it's not that I'll discard it, but I'll just sort of generally keep it mentally aside for later, because I have learnt throughout my experience on this planet that I'm not always ready for whatever comes to me, and that quite often it does make sense later on, you know. So, and this is one of those situations. But just to begin with briefly, if I go back to a biblical reference, right, the idea of the fall from grace, wherein very simply, you know, God and the archangel Lucifer are at odds, and Lucifer decides, fuck you, God, I'm going to corrupt creation and corrupt your glory and da-da-da-da-da. I want to be God in my own right, and makes the world separate from God. And, you know, Adam and Eve are then tempted by the thing. And this is all, you know, an anecdotal story that represents symbolically an attempt to describe humanity, attempt to describe the purpose that we have on earth. And you've got to remember that in biblical terms, the Dead Sea Scrolls and stories like that were handed down verbally over generation and generation and generation were designed by a very primitive people through their own revelatory experiences and meditational attempts to make sense of the world that they found themselves in, you know, as conscious beings. And since those days, 6,000 years or whatever, we've come quite a way, you know. Like, I'm sure that in those days they would have never dreamed that we'd have a space station circling the Earth and satellites and everything. So basically that story, though, the fall from grace, is kind of accurate, right? Because the way that I like to present this is that we are having an experience in the physical plane, on the physical dimension, or if I, to speak of it truly, I should say I am having an experience, try to keep it singular as often as I can, I'm having an experience on the physical plane of being separate from Source, separate from God. Is there a God? Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? I don't seem to have the answers to any of this stuff in my head. Right? And even when I watch the latest cutting-edge TED Talks, all I get is a load of possibilities and no certain answers. So my ability then to give you a certain answer, whether you want to believe it or not, which comes from my own experiences and learnings over the last 20, 30 years really, but 20 consciously, my ability to give you those answers is something that has been hard pressed to do, you know. So the idea of the fall from grace, if you look at it, that it is impossible, right? If God is everything, we'll just go to some fundamentals about God for a second. And if you don't like the word God, just swap it with whatever you like, you know, Source, the Force, creative mind, universal mind, I don't really care. The origin of everything, you know, but the idea that I'm separate from that is not actually true, because if God is everything, that must include me as I find myself here and now. Therefore, I cannot possibly be separate from God. Can you understand that? And if God is eternal, God creates in its own likeness, and God is formless, then as I look around in this world of form and shape and size and change, there is nothing here that reflects anything eternal. Everything here seems to die. And there is nothing here that seems to reflect back to me the nature of spirit. Everything is form, right? So I'm experiencing myself as completely, apparently, unlike the truth of me. And that might be a bit of a big one to wrap your head around. But if you look at the idea that if God is everything, there cannot possibly be anything outside of God, that includes there in the creation of God, of which I am a part, and you are a part, it comes to pass through spiritual learning from many, many, many countries, many different prophets, many different learnings, that the world is an illusion, that we are actually in eternity right now, dreaming of ourselves as undertaking this journey of the soul wherein we seem to have this amnesia and we don't know why we're here, what our purpose is or anything. We're just seemingly plonked here, left to work it out for ourselves. And not many of us, particularly at this stage in time and space, question deeply enough on the nature of reality. And moreover, we tend to just sort of follow along with the crowd, and we look around and see what everyone else is doing. And if we can keep up with what everyone else is doing, we tend to have an idea of ourselves that tells us that we're doing okay. Right? But okay compared to what? Remember that we don't know the meaning of life, why we're here, etc., 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 even though that I'm now explaining that to you as best I can. Right? So we have free will. God gave us free will, or we were imbued with free will in our creation. And with that, we chose to have this experience. We chose to embark upon the journey of the soul. All right, now, why? I don't know. I guess it's like the story of the prodigal son, to try and prove something to ourselves, I guess, to explore the nature of free will, to examine the potential contained within our own creation and thus come to know creation itself, which is probably one of the most highest perspectives that I could put that to you as. But it doesn't change why we came here, doesn't change, or why we're having this experience, this dreaming, doesn't change the fact that for many of us, we don't like it. For many of us, it's repetitive, it's mind-numbing, it's labour-intensive, it's draining, it's not what we want. Most of us would rather be walking on a beach in a tropical place with a little umbrella drink and just feeling in love with ourselves, the universe and everyone and everything, fellow man, and feeling connected with everything, you know. That's generally how we want to feel inside, but instead we have this often engulfing sense of emptiness in here and meaninglessness, and we look out at the world and we can't find our place in the world. We can't find an association in the world, a brotherhood in the world, or a place of belonging in the world where we feel truly satisfied, right? And the reason that that's so, the reason that we have this emptiness in here, we equate it as an emptiness because we have this sense of feeling unfulfilled, which is our ego mind telling us that there's something wrong, that part of our mind that speaks for the physical plane. But the reason that we truly feel that feeling in here is because it's a, what would you call it? It's a homing beacon, it's a call, it's a reminder that we have, what would you call it, in our travel itinerary, that we have a return ticket. I hope that sounds okay. So if we're on a journey of the soul, let's say, this emptiness inside is a reminder to us that something here is not right, that we don't feel like we fit in here, we don't belong here, and why are we here? And it begins us questioning. Now, for some of us, we can't find any answers to those questions. We're caught up in busy 24/7 lives, and we don't seem to find a minute to try and sit down and philosophically look at the nature of our lives, the nature of the world, the universe, and everything. And we become very depressed. We turn to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with the meaninglessness and the chaotic noise that goes on in our head that's telling us that something's wrong here. All right, so, and unfortunately many of us give up and commit suicide. But for those of us who persist, and I myself tried to commit suicide in my early 20s and woke up in hospital, and thankfully I wasn't successful. But I made a decision in that to find the meaning of my life, because I'd felt that emptiness inside so profoundly, so deeply. It's like family, friends, nothing, loved ones, lovers could not fill that inner emptiness. It was so strong in me. And I made a decision right then and there that while I was in the hospital bed feeling completely helpless and hopeless, that I failed at killing myself anyway, and that because I was determined that I was just going to end it anyway, what difference did it make if I threw away my life as it was before and went in search of the answers? Because the best thing that I ever had going anyway was just to kill myself. just walking with the dog. And so that decision, that choice then to seek the truth, to find out the truth of my physical existence, led me to having many physical experiences, and to this video today, I guess, you know. So we do have a true purpose. Our purpose on life is not to sit and endlessly ponder the universe and try to imagine that there's going to be some result at the end when our body turns to dust and we go off to whatever's next. Right? Our purpose in life is to make use of time whilst we find it. Right now, the world has two purposes, or there are two ways to see the world, right? You can either see it through the eyes of love or through the eyes of fear. If you're walking around ignorant of yourself, your higher self, if you're walking around ignorant of yourself with no clue about life, the universe and everything, then it's a fair bet that you're seeing the world through the eyes of fear, through the eyes of hope, through the eyes of dreaming, through the eyes of wants, needs, expectations, desires, and all those sorts of things, because the world doesn't make sense to you, right? You don't yet understand the nature of the world and what's truly going on here. You're probably content to listen to science babble on about Higgs boson fields and all sorts of cutting-edge quantum physics, and maybe you're even content just to sit in church on a Sunday, which is fine, and listen to some minister tell you something. But eventually all of us will come to the point where words are not enough. We want to experience it ourselves. We want to know absolutely the ultimate truth of our true nature, which is formless, eternal light. Right? We are beings of light. And it's kind of hard to know where to go from here, because there are many processes whereby you can come to have that experience, or where you can become to prepare the way for that experience. But all of them, in a sense, are a type of purification, are a type of unlearning of the things you've learnt now. So if I were to use another biblical reference, when Jesus says to the merchant on the road, "Give up the world and follow me," he means that literally. He doesn't just mean give up the bits you don't like and keep the bits you do. He means you have to be willing to walk out on everything and serve the greater good. Right? Without knowing how that's going to be, without knowing how that's going to look for you. And I can imagine right now there are people watching this going, "Yeah, but I can't do that. I've got kids, I've got this, I've got that." Just like the merchant in the days of old, who said, "Well, let me just go and sell all my stuff at the market, Jesus, and then I'll follow you." And of course Jesus replied with the now famous retort, "The kingdom of heaven waits for no man," which means very simply, you have this chance right now. You may not have another chance tomorrow, right? You have this chance now to make a choice, an irrevocable choice that will bring to you exactly tailor-made, universal happenings that will begin to open the way for you to a whole new way to see yourself, the world, and the universe. Right? So if you want to look at the idea then that human purpose is the reparation or the repair of a schism, right? Human purpose is to participate consciously in I guess you could call it an experiment, or a it's hard to know how to really put it, it's so vast, but a particular sequencing of choices and therein events that follow that will bring about that experience and enable the vibratory flow of the universe to shift from being one of denial and ignorance to one of certainty, purpose, and true bearing, right? So when I listen to people on TED Talks and things like that, and they stand up there well dressed and they're addressing crowds of people, it's very formal, there is an air of professionalism about that. There is an air of, that you should listen to this person, that you should pay attention because they're seen by their peers as people who know stuff, even though in the summary of the talk there's no real conclusion, right? The conclusion that you have to draw and have to come to for yourself is through experience, not through concepts. You have to have your own experience. You have to prove to yourself or reveal to yourself, for better words, that you do have a purpose here, which is to help me, help others who are involved in this with me, collapse the time it takes between the Alpha and Omega, which is the beginning of time and the end of time, which can be billions and billions and billions of years away, to end the physical plane, the physical dimension, to bring about the close of the necessity to have this format manifest as a place where we can begin to come to terms with what has happened and awaken as one from this dream, from this dreaming. Right now, that's going to be a hell of a mouthful to try and digest, and there are not too many people I know who are prepared to embark upon a path of forgiveness that is so radical that it literally forgives the world of all things, because it recognizes in essence that the world is an illusion, is a fabrication, and none of those things actually happened in truth. They happened only within the framework of a dream, which has no reality because it's not eternal. Right now, that's going to sound like a load of gobbledygook and what are you on and everything else, but again, that's why you have to have your own experience. When you wake up in eternity, look around and everyone is there. Everyone that's here now is there as light, as beings of light, and you know that perfectly. You won't want to be back here in the physical dimension. You won't want to be here, even though you'll have a purpose helping me to spread this message of awakening to those who are desperately looking for an alternative to the darkness and misery that they find themselves in on their own journey. You know? So, change happens in here, not out there. You cannot make a better world. You can only change your mind about the world. And I love the serenity prayer. God, give us the strength, I hope I get this right, give us the strength to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Basically, that's it in a nutshell. And that's pushed me into many, many dark corners over many years. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at this. I'm not saying that I'm the world's greatest, or even my own household's greatest example of living the principles of radical forgiveness. But I'm trying. I'm making a difference as far as I can, as best as I can. And trying to get these videos out, trying to reach those people who are desperate for an alternative, who are desperate for some semblance of truth, who are desperate for something that makes sense to them, right? You do have a true purpose. You do have a reason for being here, albeit an erroneous one, of which we're now sort of stuck here, but there is a way to get out of here, and that's through the resurrection, which entails that you participate in a purification process, as in giving up the world, giving up the way you see the world, and learning anew about it in its entirety, including yourself, which is an altruistic perspective. And if you want to term that as seeing through the eyes of Christ, you can. I'm absolutely on board with that. So, all right, well, I love you, and prayer of the heart for the healing of the mind that believes it is separate from God. Right? Let it come from the heart. It's what's in here, not the words. The words are nothing. Okay, well, that's about it. I've rambled on enough, and if you're watching TED Talks or anything like that, maybe just this will help to put that into perspective, or maybe not. I love you.